Hello and welcome to Cloud Security Podcast. As you can imagine, this is the first of the episode series where we're going into a bit more than just talking about the architecture side. Today, we're going to talk about threat detection in cloud environment and how you can build your own playbook. I've got a repeat guest, and I'm so happy that I got him again because it's really hard to sometimes catch on to him. So I'm so glad I got onto him. But before we get into that, if you're here for the first time and if you're listening to this from either LinkedIn, YouTube, or I guess any of our social medias, follow and subscribe. We make videos like these every weekend, and the audio version of this gets available on the website, which is down underneath over there. That's the topic. And before I can bring my guest in, I just want to quick thank you for our sponsor for this season, which is Exonius. I'll let Nate do the job because Nathan is much better than I am in doing this. So let me just quickly bring on Nathan.
Hey, Ashish and Cloud Security Podcast listeners. Thanks for giving Exonius the opportunity to sponsor the show. Exonius does exactly three things. By connecting to existing data sources, Exonius gives customers a comprehensive asset inventory, both cloud and on-prem. It then uncovers security gaps, and finally, it automatically validates and enforces policies. Thanks again, and check us out at exonius.com.
Thank you for that, Nathan. Now, the moment has arrived. Let me just get on the music vibe going. Oh, I can already feel the tremble. Hey, how's it going, man?
Hey, hello, Ryan. Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah. Thanks for having me again. Really flattered me that you brought me back again. So yeah, it's great to be back.
Well, I'm glad you came back, man. I've got Vineet as well. Hey, good day, Vineet. Hope you're well, man. Obviously, you don't need any introduction. But as you know the tradition, and you obviously have your cup. I've got my cup. Cheers to that. Thank you for coming on Virtual Coffee as well, man. Cheers. So, what are you having today? Out of curiosity, what's in your mug?
I just have like a lemongrass tea. I think it's better sometimes better than caffeine. So.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I guess it's the hour that you are in, so I guess fair enough. Not having coffee, you probably want to go back to sleep as well. So for people who have not seen your first episode with Cloud Security Podcast, if you can tell a bit about who is Ashwin Patil, and how'd you land up to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Ashwin Patil. I've been in the security space for around like 11, 12 years now. I currently work as a senior program manager in Microsoft Mystic team. That's what we call. So it stands for Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center. So it's a broader org that has multiple teams inside it. So right now, like I'm part of the Mystic R&D team. So we do a lot of threat detection research, writing and publishing content for Azure Sentinel, which is Microsoft's new cloud native SIEM. And then we also work with various product teams inside Microsoft to basically work with them on different features that they have for security analysis, hunting, and those things. And we also publish some content and a whole lot of things. That's pretty much like I have in Microsoft. So I've been in the Microsoft for around 7 years now. Prior to that, I used to work for Cisco. And prior to that, I used to work for MSSP, and then that's what.
Wow. So quite a varied career path as well. So, I mean, I guess we ask this question every episode, and you gave me the answer last time as well. Out of curiosity, what is cloud security for you? And I wonder if it's changed since the last time we spoke.
No, I think, so in a simplistic term, I will just say like cloud security is basically securing your cloud assets, resources, services, whatever you have deployed in the cloud. Now, the security can be like a pretty broad term. Depending upon your cloud exposure, you may have to think about secure design, secure architecture, security monitoring, auditing. That is where I live in most of the time. It's pretty much like securing your cloud footprint, I would say.
It's really interesting. So it hasn't really changed much, but securing a cloud footprint would also make me think that it also goes with the threats in the system. And I would love to, because coming from a threat hunting background, it's probably a great question to ask you as well. Threat detection, what does that like? when people say threat detection, is it different when you were saying threat detection pre-cloud and while now you're in cloud, or whatever the compute technology is? Is it different? Like, what are some of the things people should be aware of in threat and threat detection?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, like from my perspective, when I started my career as a SOC analyst, we used to monitor mostly for on-premises stuff like data center servers. So there were a whole different attack surface, attack vectors, and different sort of data sources and different sort of security alerts that you used to monitor. And then accordingly, you will have a certain incident response process. Now, when the organization started shifting to the cloud gives you like a lot more, I would say, like diversity in terms of your assets. So you don't have to even have a server, so you can just deploy your application, and then you have to basically see like how you can secure that application without worrying about the backend infrastructures and all those things, right? Coming back to the security monitoring, again, like cloud brings up new attack vectors, new data sources, and new type of resources to monitor, right? So if you compare with on-premises with the cloud, there's a different attack vectors, different tactics, techniques that attacker use to ultimately the goal is to gain access to your environment and then basically do some malicious activity.
Right. What are some of I think last time you came in, you kind of spoke about, so I think a few terminologies, which I think were a good introduction, like TTP, major attack, and detection research and all that. So, I mean, I guess I'm imagining this has evolved, and this is probably good for people who are looking at this and going, oh, I'm not doing threat hunting. This is not for me. So out of curiosity, is threat hunting for everyone? Like, to your point, deploy applications securely. Clearly, everyone wants to deploy applications securely, right? But do you need to be like a full-time team doing threat hunting, or can anyone start this?
Yeah. So in my opinion, the answer is it depends. I mean, most of the times the organizations do not have like enough resources to even properly do the security monitoring, auditing, and those things. So I would say like doing the basic security monitoring, alerting in place, that's the first and prior requirement for you. You should definitely have certain resources dedicated to look for certain, let's say like if you take example of you have certain high privilege accounts, you do want to monitor if somebody gains access or like if you detect any unauthorized access to those high privilege credentials, right? So that's something very essential and necessary that you should have. And then on top of that, it is really recommended, you should proactively hunt in your environment and not rely on the built-in detections and security alerts and those things. So depending upon your availability of resources, SOC team, you might want to think about how do you balance the security monitoring, threat hunting, and then work both in tandem.
That's really interesting, because I imagine that with privilege account, irrespective whether you're doing threat hunting or not, everyone has things that they want to protect. Like, you would not be giving out the privilege account's password willy-nilly. You will have some kind of two-factor to it. It would be different. It may be a separate account. So people already doing this, I guess, when they know about this. So I think, to your point, the way I hear from you, this is more around the fact that people should be considering threats anyways. It's just whether if it's a team dedicated at looking threat across the company, or if it's just you looking at threats in your own little team, or however big the team is. Is that right?
Yeah. So security monitoring itself is like very broad subject, and then there are different strategies that you can apply depending upon the maturity of your organizations and expertise and skills that you have hired already in your organization. You may think security monitoring differently. Some people will be more mature. They will have like multiple diverse team, red team, purple team, blue team, and then they will be doing like they will be running like much more mature setup. But for some organizations that may not be possible, so they might want to start with like security monitoring first, and then think about how do we proactively threaten. Also, it is essential to know like what sector your organization is failing. So you might want to think about like what are the different threats that are applicable to your organization, depending upon the sector that your organization. If it is banking, there may be certain threat actors that target the banking companies. So the shifts will go in multiple things depending upon how you strategize your program.
Ooh, I love it. And maybe it's a good time for me to kind of switch into a rapid fire round. I guess I was going to say maybe rapid fire round for some nomenclature, which is around threat hunting. Like, what is TTP? First one.
Yes, so TTP is tactic, tools, and procedures. So yeah, it's a military term, and then it's used in multiple frameworks. So MITRE use TTP. So we have in MITRE framework we have tactics and techniques. So I'm kind of shifting to the framework directly. So the tactics is basically the way that the objective that adversary wants to achieve. And then techniques is basically there are various techniques through which you want to gain, like you want to achieve your objectives, right? So if we take an example of let's say credential access is a tactic, so that's basically a goal. So somebody wants to gain access to your credentials, and then the technique can be let's say your AWS access keys have been leaked in public via some other different means, right? So the TTP, the technique can be different, and then tactic will be like how you achieve that goal.
Right. So to your point, an example, even going further, could be the fact that hey, I may have I don't know, just some kind of privileged account as well. How would a threat, like quote unquote threat, what's a potential threat to that? Is that the kind of like TTP that you're looking at then, right? Is that right? So what's a potential threat there, and how do I go about, I guess, solving or limiting that?
Yeah. So I mean, like the privilege monitoring again is it can involve like multiple terms, right? So you may already have certain privilege accounts that you are monitoring, but since you have deployed your cloud resources, there will be certain changes that are happening within your cloud infrastructures every day, right? So depending upon the access that people have, they might one day just create like a full admin policy and then accidentally attach it to certain accounts accidentally, right? So at that time, you have a new privilege account or new identity in place, which is probably not monitored through your regular means, right? So you may want to also monitor like what are the changes happening in your cloud infrastructures. If somebody is doing like anything misconfiguration and then exposing your organizations to certain attacks. So yeah.
That's a good segue into my next question, which is cloud detection research. I keep listening about, people keep talking about detection research and cloud detection research. Well, what is cloud detection research, and how does that link to threat hunting?
Yeah. So the detection, like threat hunting can be, I would say, like subset of your detection research. There are different avenues that will fuel or trigger your detection research. So proactively threat hunting your infrastructures can basically the result of your threat hunting exercise can basically give you an idea about like what is your detection footprint looks like, and then what's your detection coverage looks like, and then do you based on your threat hunting exercise, you may have like a new detection requirements. So if you take an example of threat hunting exercise, so let's say the threat hunting always starts with like certain hypothesis. So let's say like you have an hypothesis that somebody has gained access to your sensitive data, and then that data was stored in certain cloud storage bucket, right? So that's a hypothesis. Now, in order to hunt for that hypothesis, you will start thinking about, okay, in order to hunt for these activities, what are the data sources that I have, right? So from those data sources, what all activities I can see. So who are accessing my storage bucket? So if that storage bucket is not, let's say, publicly accessible, what are the different resources that are linked to that storage bucket, which may give an path to the attacker to get access to that storage bucket, right? So that's kind of like one exercise. Depending upon that hunting exercise, you will have certain outcome at the end that, okay, we have a capability to monitor either through the existing detections to detect certain activity, or we do not have that detections in place. We may want to monitor, we may want to onboard like new data sources like the cloud storage bucket, access logs, sign-in logs, and those sort of things. So that is like one avenue. There are multiple other avenues like purple teaming, red teaming, purple teaming exercises can also give the report of the purple teaming activity can also provide certain inputs to the blue team to write new detections and then develop those detections.
I love the fact that you mentioned purple teaming because I definitely want to get into that as well. I've got a question here from Vineet. I'm going to bring that up on the screen. It's just kind of like going into what we were talking about earlier, so maybe worthwhile kind of covering that off as well. What things do you consider when you do a threat hunting in a planning phase? So would detection research and kind of like, is that, I guess you kind of answered the question, but do you want to summarize it for him again, if you don't mind?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks, Vineet. So the planning is very good. Like the planning can happen like multiple other ways depending upon how you want to conduct. There was one of the talk that I recently watched in SANS Cloud Security. It basically talks about how do you mind map about thinking about your threat hunting exercise, right? So when I talked about the hypothesis, so you can start use like mind map as one of the tool, and then think about let's say what are the so depending upon the hypothesis, you may want to first pivot on the data sources that you may want to look into, and then from data sources you might want to think about what are the TTPs that are available for detect certain threat hunting techniques, and then with those techniques, like how do you want to monitor those data sources, schema, and all those things. There may be like other things can come into picture, like depending upon how you are monitoring your environment, like the SIM and all those, like, so what tools you already have, what tools you may want to think about. If you have certain capability to, let's say, proactively hunt for that hypothesis, that's good. If you don't see any results, you may want to think about certain adversary emulation tools, which will emulate certain that activity, and then you can start going back to your data sources and look for those sort of activity. So I would also like recommend, like one of my colleague, Shane Ray, he has written a blog like last year about identifying threat hunting opportunities in your data. So that's also like one of that blog is somehow related to the Azure data sources, but it's very generic in fashion. It gives like a lot of pointers about like, okay, how do you, like, what are the opportunities, and then what are the ways that you can start thinking about threat hunting in your data. So I definitely ask to check out those blogs as well.
Awesome, and I'll link them across as well. So if once you pass them over, I'll probably just put them in the I guess case show notes as well. Hopefully, we answered your question, Vineet. Let us know if you haven't. And I think that was a good segue into, now we spoke about threat detection and how it relates to threat hunting, the planning phase as well, and we kind of touched on the fact whether this is kind of applicable for any organization of any size, and we kind of touched on this, saying that maybe it is at a small level. It's not a full-time threat hunting gig. It maybe initially just like doing some threat assumptions, threat research and stuff. But building a practice around this. I imagine if you're like a startup running today, you're obviously doing it from a very small nuance. You know the accounts that you want to hold on to, and you kind of grow and become like this big enterprise, or where you feel like that threat hunting is required. At what point do you think the kind of the needle flicks over to, hey, I think I should have a threat hunting team now? It's the number of employees, or is it more like you become like a bank? Like, is there a point for that?
I think probably there may be multiple answers to that question, but yeah, depending upon the size and then what sort of monitoring that you're doing, that definitely trigger like the need for having a dedicated threat hunting team. Also, you may want to holistically view your security monitoring in place, like what sort of things that you're already detecting, what's your detection coverage looks like, and then do you have a need to either improve that detection coverage and then bring in threat hunting exercises so that you can fill up those gaps, or you may want to think about differently as well. So yeah, it depends like how you want to think about threat hunting.
Cool. That's a great answer, because I think, and this is exactly where I was trying to get to, because it can happen at any level. It doesn't have to be a full-time threat hunting team as well. You can do it. We could be doing this on your own. So considering we've actually kind of unfolded some of the primal information around threat hunting, I want to kind of get into a bit more about the purple teaming we spoke about earlier, where we've identified something. And let's just walk through. I think I would love, one of the talks that you did was around KQL and purple teaming and stuff. So I would love for us to kind of do like almost like a walkthrough on building, like we mentioned, data sources as well. So how would you, like, what's an example? Maybe if you just take AWS as an example, like how would you kind of go through from the data sources and validation, purple teaming, if you don't mind walking us through that?
Yeah, so the talk that I gave at the Purple Team Summit was around like purple teaming in AWS. So it focuses on, again, like using the adversary simulation tools. So in that particular talk, I use CloudGoat. It is probably one of the best tool available to simulate like multiple TTPs for AWS environments. It's released by Rhino Security Labs. It's an open source tool. So that tool basically provides capability to right from setting up the vulnerable infrastructures and then conducting the attack in an automated fashion, like simulating some attacker commands. And then as a result of those commands, you will have certain logs in your cloud subscription, like cloud account. And then if you're basically bringing that log to your SIEM or whatever the log technology that you have, you can start start searching for that activity, right? So I took like 3 scenarios. CloudGoat has like multiple other scenarios. Yeah, okay, thank you. So CloudGoat has like multiple scenarios that you can start simulating. So I took 3 scenarios. One of the first one was the Capitol breach. I think that has been like a good example that everyone has used to basically educate and write certain like detections. The other 2 scenarios were on the identity piece, like how you can escalate your IAM accounts and then do certain activity. So the way that I did was like there are only 3 steps. You just spin up a CloudGoat, and then you have access to certain AWS account where you can deploy those resources. Once you are done with your exercises, that infrastructures can be taken down. So it's really you will spin up that infrastructures only for a very short period of time, and then you will conduct your exercises, and then you will generate your data set. And then once you have the relevant data sources, you can just go back to your SIEM and then start searching for those technologies. Now, this is, again, like this depends. Like the one thing that we touched earlier was like, is it for everyone? I would say like if you do not want to go through all of these exercises, the easiest route will be just finding those ready-made data sets, right? So you don't basically conduct that exercises, you just get access to that data set. So the other project that I talked in that talk was Simulant. Again, this is one of my colleague, Roberto Rodriguez. I think he's pretty well known in the community. He goes by the handle Cyber War Dog. So he has multiple projects available there. So one of the project was Simulant. So in that project, he has basically outlined a similar way, but he has also generated that data set already. So if you are smaller organizations and then you do not want to go through all those exercises, you can just gain access to that data set, bring that into your log provider, and then start exploring that data set, like how the certain things looks like, and then how do you want to detect those things, right? And then there are other projects out there as well that you may want to consider depending upon what type of data sets that you want to search on and what tactics or techniques that you want to hunt for.
Good. Great answer. I was also going to say, if we kind of go a layer deeper, say, for example, if we use, I don't know, I'm going to use AWS example. Let's just say AWS CloudTrail as a data source. So I'm assuming you collect a data piece for an X amount of time, trying to see what kind of threats may exist. So it almost feels like you need to have some kind of a threat scenario already in your mind before you kind of dive into the data set. Is that right? Like, so I just simply can't, to your point about CloudGoat, CloudGoat gives you the, I guess the TTP already. So it has a few threats already built in, but that may not be applicable for your organization. So you might have to kind of think about, hey, I'm logging into this with a root account. That's a threat for me to essentially, because people should be using a local user instead of using a root account. Is that something and that should be included in thinking as well?
Yeah. So the threat hunting is based on the hypothesis, right? So you will have a full-fledged scenario in order to start hunting in your organization, right? So you may also want to think about, like, let's say once attacker has compromised your identity, what are the different goals that attacker wants to do in your environment? So let's say the CloudGoat is also great in that fashion. So it does not give you like atomic techniques, like this is how you compromise the identity. It gives you a full-fledged scenario, right? So one of the scenario was like you basically use IAM privilege escalation techniques. So in order to, like, let's say you have like a lower privilege identity access, and then by some means you escalate your identity from normal access to a privileged access. And then once you gain access to your privileged identity, you may want to just go and, let's say, access your source control server, and then basically spin down or delete that server, right? So that's a full-fledged scenario, right? So attacker has certain techniques and then a certain objective at the end. So depending upon that exercises, you will be thinking about how do you do the threat hunting and the whole exercise.
So good one. I think I've got my follow-up question is kind of what Vineet has as well, because now you're kind of like, oh, sounds like I'm pretty well equipped for this, and it's kind of where I love to add Vineet's question as well. Could you suggest best resource to get hands-on experience in Azure Sentinel, like with playbooks? Do Azure provide trial version? Before we get into that, what is Azure Sentinel, and how is it related to threat hunting? I mean, I know you're from Microsoft, so probably kind of goes without saying, but with why should people consider Azure Sentinel, and what is it?
Yeah, I think, I'll try to do my best job to explain what Azure Sentinel is. So it's basically a cloud native SIEM. So one of the, I would say, limitations of prior SIEM technologies was you have to deploy certain infrastructures, and then you theoretically will have certain limits, like how will you extend your log analysis, log storage, and all those things. But with the cloud, you again, like theoretically will have like unlimited capacity, right? So in terms of storage, in terms of processing and all those things, it's really elastic. So you can basically deploy very minimal environment, and then depending upon your scale and all those things, you can extend, right? So that is one of the cloud native SIEM that Azure has came up with, Azure Sentinel. Apart from that, we have like certain other very great features in that Azure Sentinel. One of the thing and primary thing that we have done was basically publishing a lot of detections out of the box for customers and community, right? So we publish a lot of detections, and then we try to keep updated with the latest threats and all those things on our public GitHub. Community can also come in and contribute, and then basically extend that experience to a whole new level, right? And then there is also like a machine learning and that piece that Azure Sentinel has, that also you can leverage. So Azure Sentinel also has certain machine learning based detections that you can leverage depending upon analytics that you have, right? There are also like multiple other features like the playbook that beneath this talk. So you can have like automated scenario, which is called as SOAR. So depending upon, let's say you received an alert, depending upon the alert, you may want to conduct certain actions, and then you may want to do basically take certain additional actions. Like let's say you detected a password spray attack, and then based on the alerts, you may want to either block certain IPs, or let's say somebody has access certain accounts, you may want to reset that account. So you can have that whole workflow get into the place as form of the playbook. So you will have like a automated end-to-end monitoring and plus incident response through your tools. So basically taking that burden off from the people, and then putting technology in place to do that stuff.
Interesting. And so to come back to Vinny's question, how does someone get hands-on experience on Azure Sentinel? Like, and I think actually maybe before we get that, sorry, Vinny, I'll come to your question, man, but it sprung so many questions outside that. The playbook concept, because the whole thing that we started this episode was around, we'll do threat detection, and depending on the size, it could be an individual team doing it, or it could be an individual trying to find out, okay, what are my threat scenarios in this organization, and how do I start building? People, do they actually have a playbook? Like, we mentioned playbooks in Sentinel as well, and I would like you to get into that playbook from a Azure Sentinel concept. But when we talk about threat detection as a concept, and what we were talking about earlier in the cloud context, where everything is API enabled, and anyone and everyone should be able to kind of go create automatic detection for threat, just as you're doing a threat research. Is there a need for a playbook like we do with incident response? Is there like an incident response playbook? So similarly, there should be like a detection playbook for people. Should they consider having one of those?
Sure. So typically, like if you have worked with security operations centers, or like any security monitoring teams that you have, like when I started, there was certainly a playbook for each of the security alerts, right? So even though you have like you train your teams, security monitoring teams, there is certain documentation and then certain steps that that people should take in action when they receive certain alerts, right? So that was like a static version of the playbook. So let's say you receive an alert, these are the certain 3 or 4 steps that you want to do to further investigate, and then conclude that if it's a benign activity, or you want to basically follow up with certain teams, or you may want to put some blocks and then trigger your remediation exercise, right? So that was the, let's say, static version of the playbook. now, like, I mean, even like at that time also, like there were technologies to automate and then integrate, a lot of technologies to bring in automation. But now I think it's much more easier. There is a lot of integration already in place that you can directly leverage across tools and technologies, right? So let's say you received an alert, you may want to, basically as a result of that alert, you may want to create an automated ticket, right? So depending upon like, so for that playbook, you may want to have like a first action to get to look for an alert, right? The second action will be just integrate to your case management platform. Let's say if it's ServiceNow or any third party ticketing platform that you are using. So you just basically within that playbook, you just connect to ServiceNow through an API, authenticate to ServiceNow, and then create an action to create a ticket, right? And then the third action will be either directly automatically send an email or do certain actions depending upon that playbook scenario, right? So all of those things are like much easier right now, like even in the Azure Sentinel, that you can do a lot of things by hand. So those things are certainly available in Sentinel.
Right. So to come back to Vinny's question, and thank you for being patient as well, Vinny. So what's the best resource to get hands-on experience in Azure Sentinel, like with playbooks and stuff? So would you reckon use the inbuilt Azure ones, or would you reckon build your own ones? Where do you stand on that, considering you're probably adding on to the playbook yourself?
Yes. So so Microsoft, like we have recently started called as Ninja trainings for each of the security products, right? So you will see like for each of the security products, not only for Azure Sentinel, but like Defender or MCAS and other products, we have something called as Ninja training. So that's basically available for free. So you could just search for Azure Sentinel Ninja training, or there's probably a link that you can go.
Yeah, I can add that in once you.
Yeah, I'll try to include that link in the show notes. So that's a good starting place. So that gives you a pretty good training. Azure for Azure Sentinel came from a Microsoft spokesperson. So that's a good starting place. In that training, there's a specific chapter very focused on the playbooks that will get you started, like how do you write your own playbook, and then what things that you want to consider. And then if you want to extend the knowledge that you have gained from the training, there are blogs that we regularly do. You can just do like aka.ms/Azure Sentinel blog. So people publish and blog about different sort of playbooks like very often. So you could check our GitHub, or you could just check your Azure Sentinel GitHub. So those are the couple of places. And then I'll also address the last question about the trial version. So definitely Azure itself, like I think each cloud provider gives you a trial or demo account with certain credits. So Azure gives like around $200. So you could definitely start with a new demo account that will give you $200. So within that thing that you can basically go and set up your Azure Sentinel infrastructures, and then bring in certain logs. Azure Sentinel also have certain free data set limits. So the first 5 GB that you ingest are free. So there is no charge for that. So up to 5 GB, you will not get charged. And then on top of that, depending upon your credits, you can see like the amount of data that you'll bring. So accordingly, the credits will decrease and all those things. So yeah, those are things that probably will help, I think.
Yeah. So I guess would you say there's a 5 GB limit that say you can probably keep overriding the log if you want to as well, right? If your overall log consumption is not that high, can you keep overriding the? I'm just thinking about from a startup perspective, who obviously would be cash, I guess, cash control. Not, I was going to say control, but more like they have limited cash based on the venture capital that's funding them. So they can probably keep rotating that 5 GB or keep, because Microsoft has startup programs as well, I'm sure. I mean, not that you and I are the right people to ask about Microsoft startup funding, but I've heard that there are startup fundings as well. There are, I guess, a lot of funding that you can get from Microsoft for free credits as well. If you're reaching out to them, is probably a great one. I've mentioned the Ninja link as well. But can you keep rotating that for 5 GB, or is that something that?
No. So the way it works is like the first time you set up a Azure Sentinel, the first 5 GB that you ingested will be free. So you, the meter the meter does not reset after 5 GB, right? So it will be, continue after 5 gigs, right? So, but yeah, I mean, if you are just starting out, you just want to explore like what Azure Sentinel looks like, and then just bringing like very small data set, that may be like a great, starting place. But yeah, I mean, so as you said, depending upon your, let's say if you have startup, there may be a specific programs that will probably offer certain free credits, and all those things.
It's pretty awesome. And I think thanks for going through the example as well, right? I think it's, I guess one of the ideas behind this episode was also being able to give enough information to people that they're able to go and create their own threats. Is there, outside of the whole attack meter that exists for, I guess, cloud service provider, is there any other, I guess, resource that you refer to when creating playbooks or looking at what other threats should people consider? Because I guess there's always this threat of, hey, I've got 0 day, but how often do you really see a 0 day? But most likely, most of the scenarios that one may have to think about for their industry is usually can be found in, I guess, 1 or 2 data sets around the world. And I have heard you talk about this, and a lot of other people talk about attack meter. Outside of attack meter, maybe you can talk about attack meter first, and then we can talk about if there's any other resource that you recommend people can go to for knowing about threat.
Yeah, so MITRE ATT&CK framework, I think, so if you are analyst, I think, or like you don't have like a good idea about like where you should start your detection research, or even if you have idea about like where you should start your detection research, I think knowing about what frameworks already in place will be a good, I guess, starting point, right? So MITRE, who is like non-profit organization, they have came up with like attack framework, which is pretty much like very comprehensible resource, and then it's globally accessible. It's also aligned to a real world attacks and all those things. So you can, that's a good starting point. So you can start with the MITRE ATT&CK framework for the cloud. So for each cloud, they have like different attack metrics. So depending upon the attack metrics, you may want to think about, okay, so for these clouds, these are the different attacks that you have. And then these are certain techniques, right? And then they also basically connect those attack techniques to attack tools, attack threat actors, and all those things. So there's a very good connected framework already exists. So you may want to start with those things. Also, like the cloud metrics is still like a work in progress. So it's not complete, right? So you will definitely find a lot more research that the various red teams or like various organizations publishes. So depending upon that exercises, you may want to think outside of the cloud attack metrics. These are certain new attack vectors that you have. And then depending upon that attack vectors, you may want to set up new monitoring in place.
Maybe let me add another layer to this as well. Actually, that was a good answer. Adding another layer, like what do you normally use as threat hunting techniques in your playbook? I don't know if you can share them, but would you want to share some techniques that you use on maybe on cloud data sets that you can probably share as an example for people?
Sure. So I I would say like for the most of the cloud data sources, I think JSON is probably a very good format that one should be aware. Like most of the Azure data sets, or like even the cloud data sets, even for AWS and Azure, some of the Azure activity logs, and even for, I guess, like GCP, Stackdriver, and those things, they come into the JSON formats, right? So when you go about threat hunting for those cloud data sets, knowing and manipulating that JSON formats becomes like essential skill, I would say, right? So the way that you can do is like there will be a query language available, and through which you can basically query those cloud data sets. So one of the thing, or like one of the talk that I gave was around the KQL, which is like Kusto query language. That's kind of available across different, again, Microsoft security products, like not even for the Azure Sentinel, for Azure Defender, M365, and all those products. They have a kind of a same query engine. So you can basically leverage the power of that KQL in order to go and threat hunt in your environment, right? So coming back to the techniques, again, this depends. So depending upon your hypothesis, you may already know like what data sources that you want to target. And depending upon your hypothesis, you also have certain idea about, let's say you are investigating login related attacks, right? So you will definitely look for, let's say, sign-in logs or CloudTrail logs. And then in CloudTrail logs, you want to specifically look for the login events, right? You do not want to look all events, right? So that is like kind of one first atomic indicator that you will basically, starting from the primary data set, you will basically drill down to certain type of events, right? And then once you navigated, those are the event types that you want to look for. You may want to apply certain, let's say, data analysis techniques, or even like basic stats techniques that you can use. So in the KQL you have, or like in Azure Sentinel, we have certain things, certain concepts called as tables, right? So you will have data sets stored in different tables, right? So you will basically join these tables and then try to find out if there is any information that you can enrich of your existing data set, or within that same data set that you may want to see, let's say like if you are investigating certain behavior of certain accounts, right? So you may want to compare the current day log with the previous day log, and then try to see like how was the behavior different for that account in previous week, and then how do you compare that previous with the current week. So that is kind of one of the technique that will basically, again, drill down your results from, let's say, millions to probably thousands, right? So because you always start your threat hunting very broadly. So like your first threat hunting queries will give results into like, let's say, millions or even billions, right? So you may want to basically apply certain data analysis techniques to compress that data, and then try to find out certain actionable information that analysts can act upon or investigate it further.
I love the answer about the atomic value as well. So you've gone down to that exact scenario. I love the terminology. Awesome. I probably have one more question before we kind of wrap this up. Is it different? Is threat hunting different between, say, Azure and AWS? Obviously, we spoke about Azure Sentinel quite a bit, but how is threat hunting different between, say, Azure and AWS in terms of like data sets or techniques or experience? Like, what, as a threat hunter, what would you say? How would you compare the two?
Yes. So again, like underlying cloud technology is pretty much the same, right? So you have resources, services, right? So you will have like probably a different names for same type of service, right? So excuse me. So in like, if we say from a basic, like each cloud has like compute, storage, and different, like, let's say, secret store sort of services, right? So the first and foremost, like if you want to track changes into your resources, right, that threat hunting may sound similar in both the cloud vendors. So let's say you will have those logs coming into play, let's say in case of AWS, all of those logs are getting dumped into the CloudTrail. In Azure, in the case of Azure, depending upon your resources, it will go either to the Azure activity logs or other tables, like depending upon, like let's say if it's Azure AD, it will also go to the sign-in logs and other things, right? So that's the first layer. Then the second difference probably again is basically depending upon like how the cloud has implemented certain technologies. Let's say like identity. If you take an example of identity, in the world of AWS, you have certain, let's say, policy like JSON policy that will define certain privileges that you can associate with the identities, right? And then you will have those identity in place with certain privileges allocated, right? So that's basically the type of identity that AWS have, right? Coming back to Azure, Azure has a different way, like role-based access control and all those things. So now you will have like different implementations of different, or like let's say same identity technology, right? So now if you want to hunt for the identity-based attacks in Azure, you have to think about different ways, right? Because the same, I will say like same attack vectors may not be present in both the cloud, right? So in AWS, I think you may have seen like the Rhino Security Labs, they have released like 20 different ways through which you can basically escalate your AWS IAM identities, right? So all of those 20 ways are very different, very pertinent related to the AWS, right? So that in that scenario, your threat hunting becomes very different for AWS versus in Azure. Like in Azure, you will have like different ways that you can escalate your Azure accounts and all those things. So it really depends upon what type of resource that you are monitoring, and then how the cloud vendor has basically implemented that resource type.
It's interesting and well said as well, because I think it kind of goes back to what you were saying about the atomic value and how you can kind of take it as, how do I put this? You can take it whichever direction you want, but it may also depend on the threats that you have to face as an industry. But because you technically could have both Azure and AWS and maybe even GCP as well. So it may just come down to, hey, what is the threat and how does it apply to all three cloud providers or multiple cloud providers? So that's a great answer, man. So this is kind of like towards the last segment. And I know you've done this before, but we've grown quite a bit since the last time you were here. So now I think we've crossed 40K downloads. So I think let's just say, for people who probably haven't heard you answer these fun questions the last time, or maybe I can. Hopefully, some of these answers have changed. Or if they haven't changed, I don't mind, because I like you either ways. Just 3 questions, so I'll go through them one by one. The first one being, what do you spend most time on when you're not working on cloud or technology?
I'm definitely an indoor person. So I do play Xbox games, and I think that's one of the way that I spend my time. Apart from that, I do play cricket and also do a bit of swimming. So that's kind of like other ways that I spend my time.
Awesome, because it's funny. I love how you've done your background as well. You have your gaming poster and your bat in the corner as well. So it kind of gives away that, right. I'm not surprised, because it's all part of your room or your office as well.
But that's actually kids' bat, so I would take it.
Oh, right, fair enough. Right, I thought it was your bat. I'm like, because I just thought it was the angle. It looked pretty like that is a bit of a small bat, but I just assumed it was the angle.
I'm not a baseball person, so I guess.
Fair enough. That's good. But I'm so good to know cricket and swimming and gaming. What is something that you're proud of but is not on your social media?
Yeah, I guess like I think this is the same thing that I mentioned last time. Uh, I'm pretty good swimmer. I think back in like college days, I have done like some competitions and district level and state level. So that was, I guess, like one of the probably only a skill outside of my working that I have.
Right. Wait, are you one of those people who can hold their breath for a long time underwater as well?
I mean, depending upon like how long you're saying is.
Oh
fine.
yeah. I'm sure it's not half an hour.
Yeah,
But
I would say like half an hour. Yeah, but yeah, I guess like 10-15 minutes is fine, I guess.
yeah, because I've seen some professional swimmers. They basically go into the water and they remain there for like what it seems like a long time, and they just keep going forward. Because I mean, if you bring your head out, you're basically reducing your speed or something. But I mean, I obviously don't know the dynamics of how that works, but it looks pretty cool when you see it. When the person doesn't even come out for some time until it gets a bit scary. What's the last question? What's your favorite cuisine or restaurant that you can share? I know it's been COVID times, but sure. Like, have you developed a new favorite cuisine over COVID times?
No, I mean like yeah, we have been taking takeouts also like once in a while, but yeah, there are like I guess like saffron spice is one. I guess there's one that has recently opened, and I'm not recalling the name, but yeah, I think it has started providing like kind of Indian street food, so that's a good change for that we have. So yeah, there's like one other place that we have started exploring that gives.
Wow. So Indian street food. That's pretty awesome. So I mean, that's a great cuisine type. I wonder if it's a cuisine type. It is a cuisine type. It really like street food in general is a cuisine type. So Indian street food. That's a great answer, man. I know you're making me hungry as well. Well, dude, I always appreciate you doing this, and I just wanted to say thank you once again. This is kind of like the end of the show as well. Where can people find you if they have more questions about threat detection and building threat detection practices, or doing some data, getting some data sets and ninja training as well, as we were talking about? So, where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on the social media, at least on the Twitter and LinkedIn. So you can find me on Twitter for again my first name, last name, Ashwin Patil. My DMs are open, so even if you are not following me, so you can still DM me. Or LinkedIn is also another way that you can reach out to me, drop me a message. I'll definitely get back like whenever I see it, and then I have something to add to your questions. So yeah, those are like a couple of places. I guess like that's probably most reachable. Apart from the email, I guess that's probably nobody's using the email now. So.
I don't think anyone uses email these days. Anyway, I feel like I definitely Twitter and LinkedIn are definitely becoming a lot more popular medium than email, because I was like, I'm going to stop myself before I go into that rabbit hole of what the future of email is. But I always appreciate you coming on the show as well. I'm sure everyone else does as well. So thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to bringing you back again. Maybe some more threat hunting we can talk about from purple teaming and the KQL as well. I guess for everyone else who's joining in, I also wanted to thank you to them as well, because this is the first time we've done only streaming on the cloud security podcasting. And I think we crossed over the 50 mark, which is pretty good. We had 50 live people. So that's pretty awesome. And thank you everyone for their questions as well. And if you like episodes like this, feel free to subscribe and definitely follow Ashwin on Twitter and connect with him on LinkedIn, because I think he's been dropping a lot of gems as well. So I definitely believe there's a lot more to unpack and explore here. So I hope people reach out to you, man. But thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, yeah. Thank you for having me. I really like the format, like much more interactive and streaming. So yeah, it's great to be here.
Awesome. All right. Well, I would look forward to bringing you back again to more streaming. But for the moment, we will take leave from everyone over here in the audience. I'll see everyone else next week, but I will talk to you soon, Ashwin. Thanks so much for coming, man.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Peace. Yeah.
Bye.